my Chevening colleagues, my friends from the High Commission, thank you for coming. Thank you for the platform. I feel good about the fact that we're beginning this series and I'm involved from the beginning. So I've taken my time to think about what I want to say. I have many things that I want to say. I'm very, my mind is full of a lot of things over a long period. So I've tried to sort of synthesize it and ask myself what it is that I want to convey. I see the title, Holding Government Accountable. Frankly, I was involved with it, but on second thought, I don't like it very much. Because I think it's a bit overused, and I think it also sort of puts us in trouble. You see, the media has had such a checkered history, especially in Ghana, that as soon as you say that the media is going to hold somebody accountable, my reaction is, what about you yourselves? Why don't you hold yourselves accountable? So I get a bit worried about it because it's like the watchdog. But who is going to watch the watchdog? Because you sort of have to get it right, don't you, before... It's almost like you have to have that moral authority before you sort of talk about somebody else. So that worries me a bit. But let's talk about it. And then I started struggling a bit. So I said, look, I'll tell you guys, I'll be honest, I'll stray a bit from the title, but don't mind me. You know what I mean? In a way, I said, oh, maybe we should have said the media and good governance. Then I started to go, that's better than holding government accountable. That's a bit hackneyed. It's a bit, you know, but we're here. So I'll stray from it a little, but to enable me paint a picture of what I consider the role of the media, even though I acknowledge that holding the government accountable is a primary responsibility. I mean, don't let's confuse it because I say that. Fundamentally, really, that is what it's all about. So this is what I'll be doing. Okay, let me sort of lay out what I'll be doing. First of all, I want to take a trip down memory lane with you. The whole battle for press freedom, just so I can provide some historical context, so we know where we are coming from. Then I'm going to move on from that in this presentation to share my thoughts on how I think the media has fared. I'll attempt to paint a picture of what I think should be the new paradigm. You know, building a truly independent, professional, and responsible media. So let's begin with the first part where I go down memory lane. For most of my professional life, I've been involved with the media. As a television news and current affairs reporter in '86, as an interviewer, and then later on in the area of strategic communications and public affairs, which is what we do at Channel 2. I started my career in journalism in 1986 as a national serviceman at GBC. I had no training as a journalist. I had just returned from Cuba, where I had spent 4 years at the Ideological Institute, studying politics and philosophy. It was during the heady days of the revolution. There was no private media. It was the period of the so-called culture of silence. Those were the days when the phone in the television newsroom would ring immediately after the broadcast of the 7 o'clock bulletin. And it would be maybe the Minister of Information, and sometimes the President. And he would be unhappy about a story. And they would have all kinds of views on how that story was told and why we should do it right. So that at the 9 o'clock, the news bulletin, you will give a better version. Or so it seemed. And then we would be free to go home and sleep peacefully until the next news bulletin. Some people think that the news editors in those days were puppets. Every time I describe the culture of silence, that's what people think. They were just puppets doing what the government wanted them to do without question. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, there are probably more puppets around in these days of press freedom. You see, the difference is that now it is money that makes the phone call. In those days, it was the politician that made the phone call. I remember people like Yao Jepo, Winston Obobi, Lucy Brown, so many other consummate professionals from the TV newsroom. These were editors. We were all very young journalists, and there was what you call the show editor. So in the afternoon, we all did our stories. By evening, the show editor was deciding which stories would go out. They were fantastic. I mean, they taught me to do a good job. Back then, GBC dominated the television and radio landscape. The Daily Graphic dominated the newspaper landscape. There was largely nothing else. No private FM stations. As for social media, it had not even been dreamt of. I remember the first prominent private newspaper published by my courageous colleague, and I miss him. A guy, he's called Kofi Kumsen. He published the Ghanaian Chronicle. He had a column that he called Politicus, and he wrote with fire in his belly. He was a trailblazer. I remember the first attempt at private radio by my big brother, Charles Rekobrobe, defying the authorities, saying he didn't need a license, and launching Radio I, even if stillborn. He was also courageous. I brought him immediately on my interview show. I love people that shook the system a bit. I just tend to like that. It took courage, patriotism, selflessness, and a commitment to the greater good to challenge the status quo. Sometimes I see little of it today, which is not to say they are not. There are some, and just one of them sitting in front here. Soon, other newspapers and radio stations were springing up. By now, the military regime of the Provisional National Defense Council had transformed itself into a civilian administration, having returned Ghana to constitutional rule under the Fourth Republic. This is 1992. And they had adjusted quickly to the changing media landscape. And radio was a lot cheaper to set up than television. So, and it had a certain immediacy about it. Anybody and everybody could have their voices heard. After a period of, think about it, guys, a period of what I call a culture of silence. Suddenly you've got all this. It sounded promising. It was like it was a new era. The government's stranglehold on media had finally been lifted. So, let's move to the second part. We've gone down memory lane a bit. How has the media fared since it obtained that freedom? What has it done with it? I have to say that, unfortunately, the true transformation that we sort of saw in those early days did not occur. The private stations that emerged were either mouthpieces of the government, which had quickly decided to invest in that area because it wanted to make sure that it wasn't left out of things, or there were radio stations that were largely in opposition to government. Yeah, you had some FM stations who also stayed in the area of let's play some music and let's not get into any talk. The politics of power, the need to influence the electorate through media became paramount, and the real voice of the people was drowned. Sadly, today, only a few journalists try to maintain and promote independent thoughts and champion our real social and political problems. The nature of the media today has largely remained true to its roots. Politicians continue to pursue proprietorship of media outlets as a way of securing their positions, and unfortunately, there are many journalists who have aligned themselves with one or the other. The landscape these days is dominated by the private media. Even pro-government outlets are in private hands. So what does all this mean for society and politics? Today, Ghana's press is considered one of the freest, and that's good, but it's not enough. It's not only about being free. You see, and I have to say that, it's almost like we've been stuck in time. We have achieved that. What next? You have to move on to something. Do we know what that is? Or are we still consumed by just the fact that we are free? What have we done with the freedom? Are we, in a sense, you know, this is really what is expected of us, the fourth pillar of our democracy? I dare say the record is mixed. Even if we went back to the old adage that the role of the media is to inform, educate, and entertain, we will still fall short. Never mind practicing the role of the fourth estate. Let's remind ourselves that a democracy is based on the assumption that the electorate is informed. It's interesting when Charity was talking about, and she talked about Donald Trump, and we talked about, and she used an informed electorate. I wanted to say, you mean it's almost an ill-informed? And in a way, we have to remember that that's the heart of it. And because that's where the role about a media educating, also being a tool for education, comes in. But in an environment where anything and everything goes, how can we expect to perform that role? Very often, what we have, and it's serious, especially on the radio, I find a lot of blind leading blind. It's time to move on. We are too stuck in the freedom bit. We are too happy with long past achievements. You know, Ghana, we like that, like they'll say, like 5-time Africa champions. It doesn't matter, they didn't win a trophy the last decade, but they were once 5 times Africa champions. Or, this other one, my favorite, the first country south of the Sahara to attain independence. One of these days, we will finally pass the Right to Information Bill. It will be an anticlimax. Do you know how long it's been in the books? It will be an anticlimax. And yet we'll make a big show about it. Just like Saudi Arabia, expecting people to applaud them for allowing women to drive. Never ceases to fascinate me when people want to be applauded. Saudi Arabia allows women to drive in 2017, and they want us to clap for them. The other distinct characteristic of the current media, which is a reflection of the ownership structure, and we'll come to that, is the nature of the discussions that take place on air. It's a conversation between protagonists who are set up to either see what government has done wrong or see what government has done right. Sometimes I think they speak to themselves over the heads of the people. Sometimes there's no rights, no wrong. There's always two positions. Even when it's clear that some positions hold no water. The result is that the traditional role of speaking truth to power and demanding good governance is often sacrificed. The underlying need to influence people's thinking and not necessarily to educate and inform them becomes all too evident every now and again. My friends, I think it's time to do more as the fourth pillar of a democracy. That, after all, is the mandate of the media. It cannot perform that role by taking sides the old way. To take sides now must mean to be on the side of the truth and societal progress, or to be satisfied with seeking the welfare of narrow parochial interests, even if that means denying the truth. To be successful, we must be independent, professional, and appreciate the responsibility of the media. A new paradigm is long overdue. Which brings me to the final section, that new paradigm. What is it? Every time I think about it, I think of the media being independent, professional, and with a sense of responsibility. What does it mean? Sometimes it means taking the lead in the battle in a society like ours against corruption. These days they say those who raise allegations about corruption must provide evidence. So, Ghana is begging for that. So Ghana is really begging for that at this point. It really is begging for evidence because we know where that corruption is pervasive. But, how many times have you heard of anybody getting punished for it? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So political ownership and partisan political battles and that sort of thing sometimes takes us away from these things. Television, to me, is still too focused on events and speakers at events. Newspapers are all mainly doing headline journalism, just something exciting that will make you go for it. As for social media, it is becoming notorious for fake news. Donald Trump is struggling with it. So that new paradigm, I mean, I keep saying, it takes us back to a certain level of professionalism, more independence, and a better understanding of the concept of responsibility. We have to return to basics. What is a journalist? What is his role? I mean, I really think the starting point is to know why you want to practice journalism in the first place. I think also it's all about training institutions and media owners. They have to begin, media is one of those things where if you're just an owner and you just sit aside, it's tricky because it's not an ordinary business. It's much more than that. So you have to be a little more interested in creating the mindset and environment for the good practice of journalism. To be a professional journalist is to pursue, in my view, and represent factual information. That's the starting point. And to do that, it means to do what I call follow-ups. Media houses need to set themselves up so that more follow-up is possible. Stories just come and go, no matter their continued relevance. But they are gone because another story has come. Media houses need to have specialized desks. Take them seriously. They need to pool resources together in an efficient and effective way and not always say, we need money, we need money, we need money. We need investigative reporters. It doesn't really require much to do this. It's more about how it's set up. Editors who send reporters out must encourage them to go beyond the immediate news event. For example, when you go to an AIDS conference, by all means do the report on the AIDS conference, but understand that that event is a trigger to the real story. And the real story means that another team of journalists are going to go to Kolebu to see an AIDS patient, go home, talk to the people that have AIDS. It's not just some official describing data. It's a lot more meaningful to go and talk to real people. We follow officials around too much for years. It's just people sit in a room, put a microphone, and come and pontificate. And so the story ends. Normally, I keep saying the event is the trigger. It is not the end in itself. It's not the story. There's a story about a conference on poor sanitation. But you have to go and do a document, go and do a story on poor sanitation to fill in the gaps. You can't just do the story from the news angle, the event angle. So after the story on, for example, the conference by the everyday reporter, then the news desk sends the investigative reporter to the hospital. So he goes to talk to doctors, patients, and brings the real story to life. So let's understand that. Look, let's take the recent gas explosion. It's a part of an increasing, number of explosions that we're having to experience. What will the government do to prevent it? It has said what it will do to prevent it. So should we simply take them for their word? Or should we try and keep an eye on them and pressurize them into actually doing something? It's the media is what can do that, not just anybody. Don't let them just get away with it. Flooding, annual flooding, it's extraordinary. It happens year after year. That's the other frequent disaster. Do we know exactly why this happens year in, year out? Isn't that an important enough subject to stay on until we get results? I mean, really, at this point, you can pick up a newspaper from 10 years ago and read it as what happened this year, and nobody will know the difference. Nobody will know unless you tell them this is from 2007, because it's the same thing. It's just that if you have a picture, maybe the guy wading through the water will be Rollins instead of Kufuor or Mahama. Otherwise, really, if you don't have a picture, the story is the same. Over and over and over again. And when you think about it, what is extraordinary is that, and yet we know when the floods come. There is a season. There's a rain season. So even if we didn't clean, let's assume we agreed that part of the reason there was flooding was because the drains were too full of garbage and we should clean the drains for water to pass. If you don't clean the drains, don't have a spectacle about cleaning the drains in November. You start to clean them in April, because the rainy season is April, May, June. So it's for real. But we talk about it even as the media. Around that time, we bring up that subject. We don't only bring the subject up after the rains have come and people have drowned, but we bring the subject up as the rainy season is approaching so that we can influence the outcome. Major Muhammad's killers. You know, folks, I have been traumatized like never before by watching that video of them lynching that lovely guy. I'm telling you. So I can't, up to now, I need to know who did it. What are they going to do to them? We can't leave it. But beyond that, I want to know, are we still lynching people or not? You see what I mean? I mean, we'll have a nice big fuss, we'll talk about it. Are we still, that's how we do things? That when we see people that have done something, we think we lynch them with stones and sticks and kill them, all in the name of the fact that, well, the system doesn't work properly. Wow. So this sort of thing, what next? Can the media take a lead in highlighting these issues and try and get some results? You see, the news cycle may move on, but it doesn't mean you can't have a special team whose job is to stay with important stories. We don't all journalists, all as a group have to move on. There's a place to move on, I agree. That's how the news cycle works. But surely you can have a specialized desk whose job is not to move on, just to keep moving on. I think it's critical. So, as I talk about this new paradigm, I've tried to describe what I call like professionalism and so on. Let me talk about the other bit I like. Independence, the word independence. You know, I love calling myself an independent journalist. Every time I write journalist, I put the word independence before it. To me, it's the essence. And nothing attracts me more than that. The other prefix I like, folks, and to my media colleagues, is investigative journalist. That's another prefix I like. To be described as an investigative journalist. You see, journalism is one of those, in my view, is one of those noble professions. We can't afford to just be like everybody else. I know the system is tough, and I know we're all products of the system in which we live. But there are some who have to resist the system and try and be in a different place by virtue of the profession. In much the same way that, strictly speaking, judges cannot afford to be like everyone else. I said that and I'm thinking, am I right? You see the trouble? I was just saying that the same way that judges cannot afford to be like anyone else. But if we go by analysis, investigative journalism, then that's another matter. I repeat that I think the journalists have a special role to play in bringing progress to and enhancing the welfare of society. This we will do primarily, thank you, my dear, thank you, as the fourth estate of the pillar of democracy, ensuring that those with power do not abuse it, and like Charity said earlier, use it for the benefit of all people. That is why holding government accountable is considered the primary responsibility. It's not possible to do this anyway if you are in bed with the government. In fact, the government is not supposed to be happy with the media. It's just anachronistic. It doesn't work. The government is not supposed to be happy with media. And as soon as government and media are very happy and they are all friendly and all that, we are in trouble. And people, you know, government has to appreciate the value of constructive criticism. I mean, look, I said constructive, and we have to be careful. I know that there's quite a bit of criticism that might not be so constructive. So in those circumstances, don't be surprised if people fight back. But you see, that is why we have to work hard for it to be constructive, not mudslinging. That's tricky. Because you see, really, we can't afford to undermine our credibility. When left unchecked, people in authority, they will do as they wish. With time, corruption sets in, big time. You see, the trouble with corruption, and we just mentioned it earlier, is that it doesn't just, you know, it's like they say, it's taking public money for private gain. But its effects are, I mean, we have no idea, so damaging for a society. It doesn't, first of all, limited resources are abused. And you can imagine what that does. And then after a while, like in our system, it begins to become endemic. I mean, if you're not part of it, Charlie, you won't survive. So, you know, and honestly, I have to come to that also with the media sometimes without trying to be too hard on them. Because, you know, like they say, you know, mamo eat. You know, people need to get by. And so if you're not careful, it's very difficult. You know, it's much easier. In fact, when you get to a situation in society where it is easier to do what is wrong than to do what is right. And then you are in trouble. It's called systemic failure. And you ask yourself, but you need the media to resist this. It's really understanding that the news cycle should not make every story obsolete. It shouldn't. And so we talk and talk till the next topic comes along and we move on. We can't do that. Because, yeah, American guy. He says, and let me quote, listen to what he says. Our republic and its press will rise or fall together. An able, disinterested, public-spirited press with trained intelligence to know the right and the courage to do it can preserve that public virtue without which popular government is a sham and a mockery. A cynical, mercenary, demagogic press will produce in time a people as base as itself. The power to mold the future of the republic will be in the hands of the journalists of future generations. Unquote. I think it says it all, doesn't it? So, my friends, as practicing journalists, especially those who are practicing, you have a basic responsibility to help strengthen and support the democratic process. You know, because people take your word all the time, almost as the Bible truth. You know, people read, oh, did you see it? I saw it in the press. So because of that, honestly, it's incumbent upon us to do our homework, to do it well, and put out facts rather than biased reportage. We are shaping opinions and attitudes. We have a lot of power. So we must act responsibly by being fair and balanced. So I'll wrap up, and I'll wrap up just basically saying that, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm unrealistic. So as I wrap up, I want to remind you that the media reflects the society within which it operates. You know, it's one of those things, it's tricky, isn't it? Because in a way, the media makes the society the way it is, but the media is also a reflection of the society within which it lives. So you see, the power, you can influence, the media can really change things. But it's very difficult also in our environment because, you know, I tell you what, we've got these sociocultural norms that always fascinate me. You know, we're almost like we have to be polite with big men. It's a problem. You have to be polite. Look, and you know, Ghanaians, they have a culture where you don't even want to, if you go and talk about something we are doing wrong in the presence of foreigners, some of your friends may even be annoyed. You're washing our dirty linen in public. I find that astonishing. I mean, we are worried about that. You're not worried about what is happening to our people, but you're worried about how some people will perceive you talking about what is happening to our people. That is the priority. And also this deference. I don't know what it's for. You're with some big man, so you have to be polite and don't go here, don't go there. That's not your job. Just be polite and professional. And ask them what you've got to ask them and go away. It's not, you don't dislike him. It's not because of anything. You're doing your work. So this thing in our culture is worrying. I mean, I remember doing a documentary on the way we pour raw feces into the sea. Frankly, I'm quite proud about that because I think it's gone down quite a bit. I think they're shutting down Lavender Hill. 100 years of doing that. But we focused on it and went on and on and on and on, and others also. Don't let's try and pretend we were the only people too. But the idea is that by being on it for so long, they had to do something about it. So it can be done. But we need to identify those things and work. But as usual, as I say, there are some who said, "Oh, why have I done a documentary about Ghanaians putting poo in the sea, and I put it on the internet, and I'm embarrassing the country, and it's all over the world, and it's seen. Do they put poo in the sea or not?" I mean, for me, it's as simple as that. So I get a bit confused about that thing. But be careful saying that. Be careful about what? So, guys, I mean. That we have to watch that, because it's a politeness, and sometimes a certain politeness, and it's difficult to hold big men and women accountable when you are like that, you know. And in the end, we end up where we are. So the dream, guys, is only possible if we return to the purpose of journalism and train people accordingly. Not just to have the skills required for interviewing and writing, but the understanding of their place as members of the fourth estate. Executive, legislature, judiciary, and an independent media. I tell you, without that fourth one, forget it. That's where our problem is. People underestimate it. The media is critical to the development of this country. If it doesn't sort itself out, the country will not sort itself out. It's not possible for the country to sort itself out if the media is not. It doesn't work. They go together. And I think the sooner we see that, the better. So we need to return to that. And we need to be fearless, courageous, fight for the well-being of people, of society. That's our job. It's fantastic. When everybody else is perhaps doing something, yes, it's our professional job and you get paid for it. But listen to, you know, I mean, Brad and Abla is sitting here. Every morning he spends his time, but he's making money. But listen to the subject. Listen. Listen to what he's doing is not for him. That, and other people, other editors. So I'm just trying to say, it's not just any profession, guys. It's not. Media is not. So that's the danger we have now. It's not just another job that you are in and you make some money for yourself. It doesn't work like that. If it was like that, I'd be a billionaire. Honestly. Sometimes, I look back, I think, wow, David, I came at the wrong time. If I come at the later time where things were moving. In my time, when you won Journalist of the Year, they gave you a small transistor. It's still with my mother. It's my mother's favorite toy in her bedroom. I gave it to my mother when I was Journalist of the Year, what year was I just saying? 1988. Before I went to Cardiff for a year. I was Journalist of the Year, and they gave me a present. And it was a transistor. I did this, I hear Journalist of the Year, and they're going here, and they're going there, and they're getting cast. I thought, oh my God, I was born at the wrong time. Why did I go sooner than the right time? I say to myself, how is that possible? So you don't want it to be just another profession to promote its practitioners and their income. It's more important than that. There are countries where, people give their lives. I think in Malta. Is it in Malta? Malta this week, this lovely lady who, and I dream of that day. I think, oh my God, I hope Ghana can have that. This lady had a blog that has more people going to it than the national newspaper. Can you imagine that? I wish I could do that. That actually there's a blog, Ampofo.com, and when you go, there's 200,000 people a day there, and it's more than the graphic. Do you see what you can be like? Power. And she knew that she was taking risks. Don't think she didn't. But she fought corruption. She stood for something. And she gave her life for it. They put a bomb in her vehicle and they've killed her. Wow. Wouldn't it be great if we could get to that point? So now, next week they'll be asking me on Facebook, so do you want to be killed? It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, even that, we laugh about it. I guess if you get killed for a cause, I mean, we're laughing about it. If you really get killed for a cause you believe in, you're a serious martyr. You don't die, You don't really get killed. Or maybe you get killed, but you don't die. So there's something to be said for it. It's not an easy thing. I'm not pretending, and I mean, I'll be the first to admit. But we really must admire such people. And if we can be a fraction of them, we'll be happy. Just to be a fraction of them. Maybe not to get killed, maybe to get maimed or something. So I want you to know that, and I'm done, but I want you to know that this is a very special role. And the whole idea about holding government accountable is still valid, but it's going to be very difficult to do it if the watchdog doesn't sort its own self out. But if we do that, we shall return to nicer days. I thank you all for listening. Thank you.